He had reached the edge of himself, where effort no longer moved anything, where prayer felt like it returned only as echo, where hope had grown thin and quiet. Elijah sat in his small room, the walls dimly lit by the faint glow of a single lamp. The silence around him felt heavier than noise ever could. He had always believed that if he worked hard, stayed kind, stayed faithful, things would turn. But life had not shifted. Not yet, and waiting without direction had begun to feel like sinking. There were bills stacked on the corner of the table, unopened because he already knew what they said. There were messages from people he used to speak to, left unread because he didn't have the strength to pretend he was okay. His dreams, the ones he once held with fierce certainty, now looked distant and faded, like photographs left too long in the sun. It seemed everyone around him was moving forward, and he was still standing in the same place. But it wasn't laziness. It wasn't lack of trying. Elijah had tried more than anyone knew. He had poured himself into every opportunity that came his way, only to watch each one slip through his fingers. Every time something looked promising, it collapsed just as he began to hope. And eventually, even hope begins to feel like a risk too expensive to take. The hardest part wasn't the struggle itself, it was the loneliness of it. The feeling that no one truly understood what it took just to get out of bed some mornings. The way people tell you to stay positive, while having no idea how exhausting it was to keep carrying a faith that felt unanswered. The way the world keeps spinning while you remain still, watching, waiting, trying not to break. That night he sat with his head bowed, fingers clasped tightly as if holding himself together. Tears gathered but didn't fall, not because he didn't want to cry, but because he was too tired even for his own sorrow. He whispered a prayer, one he had spoken many times before, but this time it sounded different, fragile, worn. God, I don't know what else to do. The room was still, not the peaceful kind of still, no. This was the kind of stillness that felt like something held its breath. Elijah didn't know if he expected an answer, or if he was simply speaking to release the heaviness inside him. He remembered the conversations he didn't share with anyone. The moments where he wondered if maybe he had misunderstood his purpose. Maybe the dreams he believed were placed in him were just illusions. Maybe the hope he kept alive was just unrealistic. He wondered if God had forgotten his name. But then, so quietly he almost thought he imagined it, something shifted in the room. It was not sound, not movement, but a presence, a warmth, gentle, steady, unmistakable. Elijah's breath caught, his thoughts paused. It was as though the space around him had changed density. What was heavy suddenly felt filled with something living. A peace, deep, ancient, familiar, settled into the atmosphere. Then came the voice, not heard by the ear, heard by the heart. Do not be discouraged. This is your turning point. His eyes widened. A tear slipped down his cheek before he could stop it. Not a tear of pain, one of recognition. He knew that voice, not because he had heard it many times, but because the soul knows its creator. You have carried burdens that were never meant to break you, the voice continued, each word sinking into him like warm light. Every step you walked in silence, I walked with you. Every tear you cried alone, I held. The delays you feared were not denial, they were preparation. Elijah's hands loosened. The despair that clung to him did not vanish instantly, but something began to lift beneath it. You thought I was far, but I was closer than your breath. I watched you hold on when your strength was gone. I watched you choose faith when fear shouted loud. I saw you remain gentle in seasons that could have made you hard. I saw you stay noble when you could have stepped into bitterness. You have been growing, not failing. Elijah closed his eyes, tears now flowing freely. I have waited for this moment, the voice said, steady and sure. The moment your heart became ready, not desperate, not fearful, but surrendered. In surrender there is room for transformation. Elijah felt something like a hand, not touching him physically, but touching the very place inside him that had been aching. You are stepping into a new season, the voice continued. What you lost will be restored. What you prayed for is already prepared. The doors that were shut for a purpose. The wrong paths were blocked to direct you to the right one. Nothing was wasted, not one moment, not one tear. The weight he had carried for so long did not disappear entirely. But it changed shape. It no longer felt like a burden he carried alone. It felt shared, lifted, held. I am not late, God said. I am precise. Every delay was aligned with timing you cannot yet see. The blessings I am sending require maturity, strength, and wisdom, and now, you have them. Elijah opened his eyes slowly. The room looked the same. The lamp still flickered. The bills were still on the table. But nothing was the same. He felt different. His spirit felt alive again. Light, aware, awake. Stand, the voice said. Elijah did, not because the problems were gone, but because he understood something he had forgotten. He was not walking this alone. This is not your ending, God whispered. This is your divine turning point. The change did not happen in a sudden burst of miracles or a dramatic shift that everyone could see. It came quietly, like dawn. The kind of dawn that begins in darkness, unnoticed at first, until suddenly the world is brighter and you cannot pinpoint the exact moment the light began. Elijah woke the next morning feeling different. The problems were still there. The bills had not disappeared. The future was not laid out before him in clear steps. But his heart felt steadier, anchored by something beyond circumstance. There was a peace that did not depend on what was happening around him. A peace that came from knowing he was not carrying life alone anymore. He sat for a long moment at the edge of his bed, letting silence settle again. Not the heavy silence from before, but a quiet filled with presence, with intention. He breathed, slow and steady, and for the first time in a very long time, he didn't feel afraid of the day. He stood, got ready, and opened the window. The morning air felt new. He didn't know what to do next in a grand sense, but he felt something simple and firm. Just take the next step. He started small. He cleaned his space. He opened the bills, not to spiral into fear, but to understand what needed handling. He answered messages from people he had withdrawn from. He took a walk outside, noticing the world rather than moving through it in numb routine. It wasn't that everything suddenly became easy, no. But now, the difficulties didn't drown him. There was something holding him above them. Days turned into weeks, and subtle shifts began to unfold. One afternoon, Elijah felt a nudge, strong enough to notice, soft enough to ignore if he chose. It was an urge to reach out to someone he had once worked with, someone he had not spoken to in months. Normally he might have dismissed it out of fear of disturbing someone or being misunderstood, but now he recognized something. He had learned to listen. When God speaks, sometimes it sounds like a quiet inner push. He sent the message, a simple greeting, sincere, without expectations. The reply came quickly, warm, enthusiastic, unexpected. I've actually been meaning to contact you, the message read. Your name came up in a project discussion recently. Are you available to talk? I may have something for you. Elijah stared at the screen. His heart beat slow and deep, not in panic, but in wonder. Not coincidence. Timing. They spoke later that week, and it was as though a door that had once been sealed shut had gently swung open. There was a work opportunity, one that not only aligned with his abilities, but one that seemed designed for him. Something he would have never seen or reached for on his own. The first awkward step had led to something aligned. But what changed more than circumstances was Elijah himself. He no longer chased validation or approval. He no longer tried to prove to the world that he was worth something. He no longer carried the fear of being unseen. Because he now understood something deeply. God had seen every moment. That awareness changed the way he walked into rooms. It changed the way he spoke. It changed the way he thought of himself. There was a quiet confidence, not loud, not boastful, but steady. The kind of confidence that comes from knowing that what is for you cannot be taken from you. Elijah began to notice blessings that were always there but unseen. The kindness of a stranger, the stillness of early morning, the strength he didn't know he had gained through hardship. He realized that even in his lowest moments, God had been building him, teaching him endurance, expanding his compassion, sharpening his discernment. Nothing had been wasted. And then, one evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, painting the sky in gold and amber, Elijah stood outside watching the light fade. He wasn't thinking about the stress of yesterday or the concerns of tomorrow. He simply existed, present and unburdened. In that sacred stillness, the voice returned. Soft, warm, familiar. You see now, God said. My timing was never delay. It was preparation. Had I given you what you asked for when you first asked, it would have overwhelmed you. You were not ready, but now you are. Elijah felt a deep exhale move through him, as though something he didn't even know he was holding finally released. I did not forget you, God continued. I was shaping you. I was removing what could have destroyed you later. I was building your strength. I was anchoring your faith. What you have prayed for is already unfolding. Tears gathered in his eyes, not of sadness, not of relief, but of recognition. Recognition of how far he had come. Recognition of who had carried him. Recognition of the love that had held him even in silence. You will walk into rooms in which your name has already been spoken, God said. You will receive blessings that were prepared long before you asked. You will see why you had to wait, why you had to endure, why you had to be refined. And when you receive what is yours, you will not lose it, because you will be ready. The air moved around him, gentle as a whispering breeze. This is your divine turning point, God said. Not because the world shifted, but because you did. Your heart awakened, your faith realigned, your spirit remembered who you belong to. Elijah closed his eyes, letting the words settle. He no longer needed to see everything ahead. He didn't need certainty. He didn't need understanding. He trusted. And trust was enough. The sun dipped fully beneath the horizon, and night began to gather, but it no longer felt like darkness. It felt like expectation. Elijah walked forward, not into the unknown, but into the unfolding of what had always been written for him. His story was changing. His chapter was new, and God, who had never left, was leading him into the fullness of his promise. This was not just a new season. This was his divine turning point.